Welcome to One Voice, One Night. Tonight, let the soft sands of time cradle your thoughts as we drift into the golden glow of ancient Egypt. A story awaits, hidden beneath the dunes, not of war or glory, but of secrets, stars, and sleep. The night was gentle. The moon above the desert rose like a pearl, casting a silver sheen across the endless dunes. Not a sound stirred, except for the occasional sigh of wind brushing the tops of old stone. Time moved slower here, measured not in seconds, but in grains of sand. Beneath this quiet sky, the ancient land of Saqqara slept. At the edge of the dunes, not far from the cracked stones of a forgotten temple, a small group had gathered around a fire. 4 travellers, each a stranger to the others, only days before, now sat as companions under the stars. The flames crackled softly, low enough not to wake the gods, warm enough to soothe sore feet and tired hearts. Seishat, the scholar, ran her fingers across a brittle scroll. Her eyes, dark and curious, followed the faded symbols as if reading a lullaby sung by the ancients. Next to her, Anha, a desert guide wrapped in layers of loose cloth, gazed silently into the fire. His weathered face said little, but his eyes were sharp, trained to catch the slightest shift in wind or shadow. He was not one for stories, but tonight he listened. Beside them, Naima, the whisper mage, let her fingers dance in the air, drawing glowing shapes only she could see. Her voice had the hush of evening breezes, and when she spoke, it felt like a dream. And then there was Kemu, the youngest of them all, a former tomb servant turned would-be rogue. He poked at the fire with a stick, restless and wide-eyed. The idea of entering a cursed tomb thrilled him more than it frightened him. Almost. The 4 had met 2 days ago in Memphis, at a shaded tea stall near the Temple of Ptah. A shared rumour had brought them together. An unnamed tomb had risen from the sand after a rare thunderstorm, one that had cracked the desert open like old papyrus. The tomb had no name on its walls, no offerings at its entrance. It should not exist. That was what made it dangerous. That was what made it worth finding. And so, under stars that had witnessed dynasties rise and fall, the 4 had come, riding camels through dry wind and deep silence, into the belly of forgotten lands. Now, resting before the descent, they allowed quiet to settle around them. The fire hummed. Sand shifted gently in the breeze. Somewhere, far in the distance, a jackal cried to the moon, and then was still. Naima broke the silence first. "You know," she said softly, "the wind here carries voices." Kemu looked up. "Voices?" She smiled without looking at him. "Not the kind you answer, just the kind you listen to." Anha grunted, adjusting his scarf. "Wind's just wind. You listen to it too long, it'll make your thoughts wander." "That's the point," Seishat murmured, eyes still on her scroll. "Some thoughts are meant to wander." The breeze curled around them like a silk ribbon, brushing their faces and moving the flames just slightly. None of them spoke after that. In the silence that followed, each one drifted inward, toward their own hopes, their own fears. For tomorrow, they would step into a tomb untouched for thousands of years. But tonight, they simply breathed beneath the stars. And somewhere below them, far beneath the sand, the tomb waited, unchanged, undisturbed, and listening. At first light, the desert looked like a frozen ocean. The wind had carved ripples into the dunes, as if the sand were waves paused mid-motion. The sun rose quietly, casting long shadows across the land, painting gold onto every surface. The fire had long since died. Their packs were loaded, the scrolls tucked away. The four travellers stood at the edge of the gaping crack in the earth. It wasn't a dramatic chasm, just a jagged slit in the sand, barely wider than a camel's stride. But it was deep. Far below, too far to see clearly, something waited in the cool hush of the underworld. Seshat held out a small clay amulet, the Eye of Horus. She whispered a few protective words, though no one could quite hear what she said. Kemu peered down into the opening, one hand shielding his eyes. "I don't see a bottom," he muttered. "Is there even a floor?" "There's always a floor," Anha replied dryly, adjusting the rope coiled over his shoulder. "It's what's on it that matters." Naima said nothing. Her eyes were closed, lips moving silently, fingers curled around a pale stone the size of a plum. When she opened her eyes, they shimmered faintly, as if moonlight still lived in them. They descended one by one. The rope held firm, anchored by two metal stakes, driven deep into an old sun-hardened rock. Anha went first, followed by Kemu, then Seshat. Naima descended last, her movements almost weightless, like a bird drifting down a quiet breeze. The air grew cooler as they went lower. What had once been dry and scratchy turned damp and smooth. The walls around them, carved from ancient sandstone, bore faded murals, symbols too eroded to read clearly, yet haunting in their presence. Finally, their feet touched stone. A chamber opened before them, shaped like an inverted triangle, wide at the base and narrow at the top. Its walls were slanted, like the ribs of some buried beast. Seshat unrolled a small map. "This isn't in any records," she whispered, almost reverently. "No mention in the temple archives. No trace in scrolls. Nothing." Kemu lit a small lantern with flint and oil. The glow spilled across the chamber, revealing broken statues. One was missing a head. Another, a lion-faced god, leaned heavily to one side, its arm half buried in the floor. Naima ran her fingers along the stone, feeling its memory. "Someone sealed this place on purpose," she said at last. Anha raised an eyebrow. "You mean buried?" "No," she said softly. "Sealed." They moved forward slowly. Their footsteps echoed, soft but present, like whispers bouncing between long-forgotten bones. Along the far wall, a narrow corridor led deeper into the earth. Its entrance was shaped like the mouth of a jackal, sharp teeth carved into the stone arch. Kemu hesitated. "That's not welcoming." Seshat raised her lantern. "It's Anubis," she said, "god of the dead, the guardian of tombs." "Still not welcoming," Kemu repeated. But they went in. The corridor sloped downward, the air thick with silence. Dust clung to every surface. Their lights flickered as they moved deeper, casting long, strange shadows that seemed to shift when no one was looking. The air was heavier here, older, filled with the weight of time. Eventually they emerged into a circular chamber, a dome of stone above them carved with constellations. But not the ones they knew. These stars danced in spirals, aligned to something foreign, something forgotten. In the centre stood a low pedestal. Upon it sat a small obsidian box, no larger than a loaf of bread. No markings, no lock. Just waiting. Naima took a slow breath. "This is it," she said. "This is what woke up when the storm came." The group gathered around the box. No one reached for it. Not yet. Because deep below their feet, something shifted. Not loud, not violent, just aware. The silence in the chamber felt thicker now, like a blanket pressed gently against their ears. The four stood motionless around the obsidian box, each waiting for someone else to speak, to move, to break the spell the room had woven around them. Anher shifted first. He circled the pedestal slowly, eyes scanning the floor, the ceiling, the air itself. His footsteps were measured, quiet. Years of guiding caravans through cursed dunes had taught him to listen to more than just sound. "There are no traps," he said finally, though not with certainty. "Not that I can see." Seishat leaned closer, narrowing her eyes at the box. Her breath barely stirred the dust on its lid. "No markings," she murmured. "Not even the Maker's seal. That's impossible. Everything has meaning." Even silence, Kemu's fingers twitched beside his belt. Curiosity was winning over caution. Naima, standing slightly apart from them all, closed her eyes again. Her lips moved with barely a sound, and a pale shimmer drifted up from her fingertips, like morning mist. "Don't open it yet," she whispered. Her voice carried strangely, soft but final, as if even the chamber itself heard and paused. "It's not locked," Kemu said quietly, glancing from one face to another. "It's just sitting there. Why would they hide something and then not lock it?" "Because it wasn't meant to be taken," Naima answered, her eyes still closed. Seishat finally straightened, stepping back from the pedestal. "There's an old tale," she said, "from a temple I studied outside Aswan. A story about the pharaoh who erased his own name." "That's a myth," Anher muttered. "Maybe," she said. "But in that myth, he hid something he couldn't destroy. Something tied to his voice, his memories, his will." "The box?" Kemu asked. "Or what's inside?" she said. The lanterns flickered. A cool wind moved through the chamber, not strong, but strange, given how far underground they were. It carried a faint scent, not rot, not dust. Something sweeter, like old perfume lingering in forgotten linens. Naima opened her eyes. "The box is dreaming." They looked at her. "I don't know how to explain it," she said softly, "but it isn't sleeping. It isn't dead. It's dreaming." The room seemed to breathe with her words. Anher moved back toward the corridor. "We shouldn't touch it." But the pedestal had already changed. Kemu, who hadn't laid a finger on the box, now stepped away from it slowly, eyes wide. "I didn't do anything," he said. "I swear. I just blinked." Seishat gasped. The pedestal was no longer stone. It was still there, but its surface shimmered, shifting like black water in candlelight. Symbols had appeared, spirals, eyes, broken lines, and faded just as quickly. Naima stepped forward. I think it's responding." "To what?" Anher asked. "To us," she said. The floor beneath them gave a subtle tremor. Nothing alarming, more like the deep sigh of something buried far, far below. Suddenly, the lantern in Kemu's hand blinked out. Darkness rushed in like a wave, but just before panic could rise, a soft golden light bloomed from the walls themselves. The carved constellations began to glow, slowly, as if waking from a long slumber. And then, a sound. Not loud, not sharp, just a hum. A low, resonant tone that vibrated in their bones, like the sound of a temple bell struck deep underwater. Seishat whispered, "We've been invited." The chamber pulsed with a soft glow. The constellations carved into the dome above their heads, once lifeless etchings, now shimmered with a quiet radiance. Not stars, not truly. Their shapes were unfamiliar, spiraling and intersecting in ways that defied earthly sky maps. These were not constellations of any desert night. They belonged to another sky. Seishat traced one glowing line with her eyes, lips parting slightly. "This isn't just a tomb," she said. "It's a message, a map, maybe even a portal." Kemu shifted uneasily, his eyes darting between the glowing walls and the obsidian box. "Portal to where?" "Not where," Naima murmured, tilting her head. "When?" A beat passed. Even the ever-steady Anha did not speak. Naima knelt beside the pedestal. Her hand hovered just above the lid of the obsidian box, close enough to feel the energy rising from it in soft pulses, like breath. "Dreams aren't bound by time," she whispered. "Neither are echoes." The room hummed again, and the walls began to move. Not shift, not collapse, but transform. What had once been solid stone dissolved into vision. The chamber stretched, not physically, but perceptually. The air shimmered like heat rising from sun-baked stone, and the edges of the room fell away. Before them lay a vast corridor, impossibly long, lined with glowing columns etched with flowing script that moved like ink in water. They were no longer inside the tomb, or perhaps the tomb had changed. Anhur drew his curved blade, not in threat, but in acknowledgement, the way one greets something old enough to deserve respect. Naima stepped forward first, the folds of her robe drifting like mist behind her. The others followed, each footstep silent on the now glass-like floor. As they moved, the corridor responded. The columns pulsed with warm light. Scenes played out across their surfaces. A pharaoh walking backward into shadow. A priest holding fire in both hands. A boat sailing through the stars, rather than the Nile. No one spoke. Even Kemu, who was often the first to break tension with a comment or question, stayed silent. He watched the moving symbols with wide eyes, as if afraid a single word might collapse the vision around them. At last, the corridor opened into a great hall. It was vast, larger than any structure buried beneath the sand should ever be. A ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. Stone steps led downward to a shallow pool, reflecting not the ceiling above, but the sky, filled with constellations both ancient and unknown. Naima approached the water's edge. Her reflection blinked once, and then changed. It was her face, yes, but older, wiser, wearing robes stitched with starlight and sand. The reflection tilted its head, as if listening to something far off. Seshat stepped beside her. Her own reflection did not match her movements either. Instead, it unfurled a scroll made of gold leaf and light. "They're not reflections," she whispered. "They're potential, or prophecy," Anha added quietly. The hum returned, deeper now, as if the entire chamber was singing. From behind the pool, a shape emerged, not walking, not gliding, simply appearing. It was tall, cloaked in blue-black wrappings like midnight wind, its face hidden beneath a jackal mask wrought from gold and lapis. In its hands, it held a staff carved with the eye of Ra at its crown. No feet touched the ground. Naima bowed. The others followed, unsure whether instinct or reverence guided them. The figure did not speak, but they heard it all the same. A voice not made of sound, but thought, entered their minds. "You have entered the house of memory. You may ask your question." The chamber fell utterly still. The four adventurers looked at one another. They had not discussed this part, but some part of them had known always that they were seeking not treasure, but truth. No one moved. The figure before them, silent, veiled in gold and shadow, waited without impatience. The chamber breathed around them, as if holding its breath not out of suspense, but respect. Time was stretched thin here, suspended like silk between stars. You may ask your question. The voice echoed again, not aloud, but in the hollow of their minds, wrapped in the cadence of ancient wind and temple bells long faded. Seishat stepped forward slowly, scroll clutched to her chest. We came seeking knowledge, she said quietly. A tomb with no name, a pharaoh erased from history, a box that dreams. We want to know, why was this buried? What was so dangerous that it had to be forgotten? The figure tilted its head. The golden jackal face caught the shimmer of constellations dancing on the pool's surface. The eye of Ra atop the staff pulsed once, casting a warm ripple through the hall. Because memory is power, and forgotten things are not always gone. Naima closed her eyes, her voice soft. Is this the pharaoh who erased himself? No. It is the pharaoh who remembered too much. A long, slow breath moved through the chamber, though no one breathed. Anher lowered his weapon. His voice, low and dry like stone on stone, cut gently through the stillness. What did he remember? The world before the gods. The vision shimmered. Suddenly the walls dissolved into a whirl of stars and golden light. The travellers stood no longer in a hall of stone, but upon a vast desert of constellations. Beneath their feet, nothing but space. Around them, a sky filled with glyphs moving like birds in flight, scenes unfolded around them. Not dreamlike, but vivid, pulsing with ancient memory. They saw a city carved not of stone, but sound. People whose eyes shone like the Nile under a full moon, speaking in harmonies instead of words. Pyramids not built, but grown, emerging from the sand like lotus blossoms under sacred music. And then, the silence. A silence that ended the world. The images dimmed. The golden figure now stood beside them. The pharaoh was not a man, it said. He was a vessel. His mind touched the first memory. He tried to keep it alive. But minds break. Kemu swallowed hard. So he hid it in the box. The figure did not answer directly. Instead, it turned, staff pointing to the obsidian box now hovering in the air at the center of the vision. Its surface swirled, no longer black, but filled with tiny specks of light, like stars caught inside an onyx sea. What he could not carry, he sealed. What he could not forget, he buried. Naima whispered, and now we've found it. No, now it has found you. Silence again, but not a threatening silence, a knowing one. The vision slowly faded. The pool returned, the glowing pillars, the whispering walls, and the figure gone. In its place stood only the box. The group stood still, processing what they had seen, not just with their eyes, but with something deeper. Some part of them had shifted, perhaps awakened. Seishat knelt beside the box. What do we do now? The box, humming gently, responded. A slit opened, silent, seamless, revealing inside. A scroll, old but uncracked. A single feather, and a small glass vial glowing faintly gold. Anher reached forward, hesitated, then took the feather. It dissolved in his hand like warm smoke, curling into the air and vanishing without a trace. No one spoke. Because far below this hall, beneath chambers unvisited and stairwells long collapsed, something else had stirred. And the journey was only beginning. The passage behind the pedestal opened like a breath, wide, curving, endless. They stepped forward, one by one, into the spiral. It was not a hallway in the usual sense. The path curled downward in a smooth descent, the stone beneath their feet impossibly clean. No dust, no cobwebs. as if the place was still being used, or had never truly slept. The deeper they walked, the more the air changed. It was neither hot nor cold. It carried no scent, only stillness. And yet it was not empty. There was a sensation, subtle and slow, that something was watching, though not with eyes, not to judge, only to remember. Seishat ran her fingers along the curved walls as they walked. This spiral, it's not architectural, it's symbolic. Of what? Camus asked, his voice softer now. She paused. Of descent into truth, Naima, walking behind her, added quietly. Or descent into the self. The walls began to shift, not crumble, not collapse, but unfold. Etchings emerged, like ink bleeding slowly into parchment. Scenes carved in relief, ships sailing through the stars, people planting dreams into sand, a sun with 7 faces watching over a city of glass. The figures in the carvings wore no crowns, carried no weapons, only scrolls, feathers, and open hands. Anher said nothing, but his eyes followed each panel. The spiral grew wider. A dim golden glow began to rise from the floor. Not light exactly, but memory taking shape. The hallway ended at a vast circular chamber. In the centre stood a dome, a smaller inner sanctum encased in transparent crystal. Floating inside it, a single flame. It flickered, though there was no air, no heat, no smoke, just light. It pulsed, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. Seishat stepped forward and placed a hand on the dome. It's not fire, she whispered. It's a name. Naima's voice came next, more certain. It's his name. The pharaoh who remembered. The one erased not in punishment, but in protection. Because remembering too much could unmake the world. The box had been only a vessel. This was the source. The flame drifted within the dome like a thought, trying not to disappear. And from somewhere far off, perhaps the walls, perhaps their own minds, they heard the voice again. This name was hidden to spare the world. But the world no longer remembers what it fears. The chamber trembled, but not with danger, with readiness, as if it had waited for them, and only them. Naima reached out. She did not touch the dome. She only closed her eyes. And in that stillness something ancient stirred, not to rise, not to return, but to rest, because now someone else remembered. They descended further. There had been no decision, no words exchanged, only the quiet understanding that the box, now closed once more, had not ended something. It had begun something. A staircase revealed itself at the back of the chamber, not built with stone, but formed from shifting sand, held in place by a soft golden glow. As they stepped down, the steps solidified under their feet, each grain folding into form, as if the tomb itself responded to their movement. Below, the air thickened, not with dust or heat, but with presence. The torches they carried burned steady, yet the darkness around them was not driven away. It merely made space. At the foot of the stairs was a door, carved from deep black basalt. It held no handle, no seal, only a single symbol etched in faint glowing script, a feather crossed by a flame. Seishat stepped forward, fingers outstretched. The feather of Ma'at, she whispered. Truth. Judgment. Naima stepped beside her. And flame is purification. Kemu peered over their shoulders, lowering his voice. So, if you lie, it burns you. No one answered, but Anher nodded grimly. Then the door opened, not with a sound, but with stillness. The air pulled inward like breath, and the basalt parted. Inside, a great hall waited. The walls shimmered like starlight caught in obsidian. Thin golden lines traced across every surface, moving slowly like veins. Above them, no ceiling, just a dome of ink-black sky filled with swirling dust, glowing ever so faintly in constellations that rearranged themselves every few breaths. At the centre of the chamber stood a scale, massive and ancient. One side bore a single white feather, suspended as if weightless, the other empty. As they entered, the scale trembled, not violently, gently. A voice, not spoken but woven from the wind itself, slid through the chamber like silk. "Lay down what you carry." The four travellers looked to each other. Seishat stepped forward first. From her satchel she removed her scroll, the one she had studied for years, chasing whispers of forgotten tombs. She hesitated, then placed it on the scale, opposite the feather. It vanished. The scale did not tip. Naima followed. She knelt, whispering softly, and placed the smooth stone she always carried. A conduit, a link to her lineage. A piece of magic from a grandmother whose name no longer lived in records. Gone. No weight shifted. Kemu was next. He reached slowly into his robes and drew out a small pouch. Within it, a ring. Rusted. Simple. A gift once stolen, never returned. He looked at it for a long moment, then let it go. Still, the feather did not move. Anher stood alone. He did not reach for a pouch, or scroll, or relic. Instead, he closed his eyes and whispered a name. It was not one the others heard, but the scale did. The name hung in the air like incense, sweet and sorrowful. Then it too vanished. The scale held steady. The feather drifted slightly upward, and the golden lines on the wall pulsed once, then dimmed. "You are known. You may enter." A portion of the far wall dissolved into mist. Behind it, another passage, this one lit not by torch or magic, but by the pale glow of water. They stepped through. The path narrowed, curved, widened again, then opened onto something breathtaking. A vast underground river. Its waters shimmered like liquid starlight. Above it, the stone roof arched high, held up by columns shaped like open lotus blossoms. The air smelled faintly of myrrh, and in the distance, soft music drifted, notes played on strings older than kingdoms. A single boat waited at the shore. No oars, no sail, just a place to sit. Naima stepped in first, her robes catching the glow of the river. The others followed in silence. The boat moved without sound, drifting into the current. And as it slipped forward, the columns behind them began to fade, one by one, until there was no going back. The river carried them onward, deeper into the memory of a pharaoh who could not forget. The boat glided forward, silent as thought. No current could be seen, and yet the water beneath them shimmered in gentle waves, light rising from below like stars stirring in a slow dance. The four sat quietly, each in their own corner of the boat, wrapped not only in robes but in memory. No one spoke. It wasn't silence born of fear or reverence. It was the silence of knowing they had passed a threshold beyond words. Above them, the ceiling faded away into darkness. Not night, but something older. And along the far bank of the river, shapes began to appear. Figures, tall and still. They stood at intervals, like statues, yet somehow more alive than stone. Their bodies were cloaked in gauze and linen, their faces veiled in gold and shadow. Each held something in their hands, a mask, a scroll, a reed flute, a clay vessel. And they watched, not with eyes, but with remembrance. Seishat leaned slightly toward the water's edge. "These are the forgotten," she whispered, "the ones whose names were erased." "They are not angry," Naima said, her voice just above breath. Only waiting. Camus squinted at one of the figures. What are they waiting for? Anha answered, voice low. To be remembered. The boat curved gently to the right. Ahead, a series of stone arches rose from the river, each more worn than the last. On the third arch, glowing glyphs pulsed softly, changing shapes, as if unsure what language to speak. Then the boat passed beneath it. A wave of sound washed over them, not loud, not harsh, but full. It was the sound of wind in reeds, of papyrus being unrolled, of children laughing far away. And beneath it all, a voice, gentle and old, like a grandmother telling a story under starlight. Do you know your name? It asked not to test, but to remind. The question passed through them like wind through curtains. Naima lowered her head. I was named for the silence between two storms, she said. Seishat closed her eyes. I was named for a goddess who wrote truth into stars. Camus frowned, whispering. I was named by a man who left before I could ask him why. Anha said nothing. And yet the river responded. The water around the boat began to glow brighter, no longer just stars, but symbols rising to the surface, then fading. Names. So many names. Some familiar, most forgotten. They drifted past a temple half sunken into the river bank. Vines of silver thread clung to its walls, and inside, a single priestess sat, still as a statue, holding a bowl of sand that flowed endlessly from nowhere. Seishat watched her as they passed. She's measuring time, she whispered, but not for us. Soon, the river narrowed, and mist rolled in like a slow breath. The world shrank to the boat, the water, and the dream. Naima placed her palm on the side of the boat. This river doesn't lead to treasure, she said softly. It leads to memory, Seishat replied. Anha, his gaze fixed ahead, finally spoke. Then we must remember carefully. Camus tilted his head. Why? And as the boat passed under the final archway, the voice from the river returned. Because memory is what the gods fear. The mist parted. Before them stood a shore unlike the others. Black sand, blue fire flickering at its edge, and a staircase carved not from stone, but from pure darkness, shaped like steps and held together by will alone. The boat stopped, no sound, only waiting. They stepped off together. The staircase led not up, not down, but inward, into a place where no light could go, where no name had ever echoed. And still they walked. The steps did not creak. They did not echo. They simply existed, shaped from shadow, folding gently beneath the traveller's feet as they moved into the space where even the gods whispered less. There were no torches, no flame, and yet the path remained visible, lit from within by something not of this world. Perhaps memory, perhaps will, or perhaps the tomb itself was dreaming now, and they were walking inside its sleep. Behind them, the river was gone. Ahead, only space. Then, a breath. It was not theirs. It belonged to the place. The air thickened like honey warmed by the sun. Symbols drifted in and out of view, floating through the air like ash, glowing faintly before vanishing again. They bore no meaning to the eye, but in the mind they spoke. Whispers of lives, of names, of fears left unsaid. Naima reached up and caught one between her fingers. She inhaled, and for a moment her face changed, not in form, but in presence. Her gaze became distant, ancient. She saw something, and then it passed. Seishat slowed as the path widened again, forming a vast chamber with no clear edge. There were no walls, no columns, only pillars of memory, tall as obelisks, transparent as morning mist. Inside them danced images, flickering and slow. Anher stepped close to one. Within it, he saw a woman, her face painted in ceremonial red and black, holding a baby wrapped in reed cloth. The woman looked up and smiled. And somehow he knew that smile. It belonged to a time he had not lived, or perhaps had forgotten. Kemu passed by a different pillar. His reflection followed him, only it wasn't his face. It was younger, older, changing as he walked. One moment it laughed, the next it wept. Then it wore a golden mask, then none. Each step brought more images, more voices, not loud, but constant. They were in the tomb of remembrance, a place where forgotten things came to rest, where lost names found home. At the centre of it all stood a dais, simple, circular, etched with a spiral that led to its heart. There, waiting, silent and still, was the box, the obsidian box they had found in the first chamber. But now it was open, inside nothing, and yet everything. Naima approached first, her footsteps soundless. She stood over it, eyes soft, expression unreadable. "It's not a container," she said. "It's a mirror." Seshat nodded, but not for the face. For the soul, Kemu looked into the box and saw nothing. Then saw himself, but not now, not here. He saw every version of who he had been, every choice not made, every door not opened, every name not spoken. He gasped softly, then stepped back. The room darkened, not from absence of light, but from fullness, like ink spilling into water. A form rose from the spiral at the centre of the dais. It had no face, only hands. Hands made of sand and smoke and light. They held nothing, but extended toward the travellers, not in demand, but in offering. And again, the voice returned. "You have walked the memory. You have spoken no lies. You may carry the flame." From the box, a single thread of golden light rose, coiling like incense smoke. It moved toward Naima first, then Seshat, then Kemu, then Anha. It did not enter them. It simply lingered, and then divided into 4 equal strands. Each one a memory gifted, each one a name returned. They did not understand it with words. They understood it by silence, by weight, by warmth, by what it meant to be remembered. And from beyond the invisible walls of the chamber, something old sighed. Not in sorrow, but in relief. The golden threads shimmered around them, floating like fireflies in a breeze no one felt. They did not bind. They did not burn. They simply stayed, as if the tomb itself had placed a hand on each of their shoulders, not to hold them down, but to say, "I see you." And then, as slowly as it had appeared, the chamber began to dissolve, not in fear, not in destruction, but in rest. The pillars of memory faded into starlight. The dark path behind them became a gentle incline. The mist rolled in again, soft and blue. And beneath their feet, the ground gave way, not falling, but rising, like they were being carried upward in the arms of something far older than stone. No words were spoken, no map was needed, because what they had come to find, they now carried within. The box, once obsidian, now a vessel of light, folded into itself, shrinking, softening, until it became a single speck of golden dust that vanished into the air, like the last moment of a dream. Seshat felt her scroll case lighten. When she opened it later, she would find a single line etched in a language no living tongue could speak. But her heart would understand it. Naima, holding nothing, now carried everything. She would speak less from that day forward, but when she did, people would sleep easier in her presence. Kemu, whose fingers had once itched for coins and locks, now traced glyphs in the sand just to feel the rhythm of stories untold. And Anher would walk the desert as before, but no longer as a guide, now as a guardian. The stairway behind them folded away into nothingness. The sand beneath their feet was warm again. The sky above, vast and clear. Dawn. They stood once more at the mouth of the tomb, but the entrance was gone. Not buried, not sealed, just no longer there. The storm that had uncovered it had passed. The earth had reclaimed its secret, and it was at peace. They did not speak as they mounted their camels, as they turned toward the long stretch of desert that led back to Memphis. The sun was rising behind them, the wind gentle, as though sighing through forgotten reeds. And somewhere far below, beneath the dunes and the stillness and the weight of unspoken names, a memory exhaled and slept.